What up, everybody? This is the Ultimate Patriots Podcast with your host, Dr. Dennis Teehan, recording today from the Hedge Better studio in Braintree, Mass. With me, as always, the CEO of Hedge Better himself, Justin Fein. Justin, my man, how are you today?
Cool, man. Rainy Tuesday, waiting the first preseason games, right? It's the countdown's beginning officially.
Yeah, I can't believe I made it here today.
I know. Yeah, one of the rare occurrences. We get you in studio. Yeah.
I mean, the traffic is so ridiculous. Dedham, Braintree are like 10-minute ride, but it's like takes like 4 times that. It's wild.
No, absolutely brutal. Kudos for you to making it down here. Surprised you were able to get here in time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I left early and I came late, but I did make it here nonetheless.
That's right.
All right, so we got a lot to talk about. We got a great roster of topics today. It's been a busy week in Patriot Nation and certainly a lot to digest. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about everything happening in Foxborough. Drake Maye, Jacoby Brissett. We're going to talk a little bit about this game Thursday night, and then we're going to talk first of all about the big story of the day, which is the Brandon Aiyuk news that broke last night. We're going to preview the NFC North, and we're going to talk about a few topics around the league. So we got a great episode. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's go. We're going to start with the kickoff. That is the opening tape to set the table for the rest of the podcast, Justin. And I want to begin with the big news, the reporting last night out of San Francisco that not only was Brandon Aiyuk cleared to be traded, but that the New England Patriots were one of the 2 teams that were the finalists for this team, for getting Brandon Aiyuk on their team, the other being the Cleveland Browns. And I just want to start by saying this, because when I heard that the final 2 teams were the Patriots and the Browns, that really struck me as very odd. Because I did not expect that either of those teams would be choices that Aiyuk would necessarily want to go to.
Right.
And the first thing that I thought of when I heard that is that this is a leverage play from one of the 2 sides here, either Aiyuk or the 49ers. And don't be surprised, first of all, if he still signs in San Francisco and resigns after all this.
Right.
Or second of all, if a third party pops in here at the last minute and snatches him up.
Yeah.
And then reporting this afternoon now, sure, lo and behold, the Steelers are back in. And we've heard Aiyuk linked to the Steelers before. So my first question to you, Justin, is while it seemed like maybe it was a 50-50 thing last night that the Patriots were going to get Aiyuk, now it seems like it's a little more uncertain. Is this going to happen? Is Brandon Aiyuk going to be a New England Patriot at some point in the next few days?
It hurts me to say it, but no, I don't think he is. I don't, because, there were rumors that the Patriots were one of the first teams, when this whole thing kind of broke out. They were one of the early teams that reached out to the 49ers. I think they wanted to give Aiyuk something like $26.5 million a year. I think those are the reports, right? And he turned it down. He didn't want to come here. If I know he's asking for like $30 million, but even if we gave it to him, right? Do you think he would come here over Pittsburgh or Cleveland if they matched that offer or came very close to it?
Well, let me say this. I mean, are Pittsburgh and Cleveland top of the league contenders either? And I think that's what I find so unusual about it. Like, if a guy wants to go to a place to compete and he goes to Pittsburgh and Cleveland, I mean, I think those are both. I like Cleveland this year, but I certainly wouldn't say they're a surefire Super Bowl contender. That's one player away. And Pittsburgh is mired in mediocrity. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that the Patriots have more to offer Brandon Aiyuk to entice him to come here besides anything but money.
Right.
And I think the only way that Brandon Aiyuk would come to New England over pretty much any other team in the NFL, not just Pittsburgh and Cleveland, but anyone else, is going to be that they blow him out of the water with a financial offer.
Yeah. And, look, if you're going to do it, I feel like if you're the Patriots and you're trying to go all in on Aiyuk, right? What's the difference between 26 or 28 or 30 or 32 million in the grand scheme of things, right? Like, this is the time for you to go out and sign some players and give out some big contracts. Like, you have your quarterback on a rookie deal for the next however many years, 4 years at least, right? Is even 5 in the first round now?
Yeah, I think it's 5 in
Five in the first round.
Yep.
Okay, so you got a quarterback who's not going to need a new deal for at least another, 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Right. You just signed a bunch of your guys to some reasonable contracts. Why not? Why not go out and secure a fundamental wide receiver one for your offense, help that young quarterback out, and start to build your legitimacy on offense and as your organization, as a team that players will want to come and go and compete in something that you guys are putting together.
So that was going to be my next question to you is, do you want this to happen? It sounds like we both agree, because I agree with you. This isn't going to happen.
Right.
Aiyuk is not coming to New England unless they blow him away with a financial offer. And even then, I still am skeptical that the player would even want to come here.
Right.
But do I want him here? Yeah, I want him here. Like I think this would be a good move for them. And I'm going to tell you why I would want him here. And it's because to me, this is a move for the future. This is a move for Drake Maye's future. The NFL salary cap is soft. It's fuzzy. It's kind of crap. We know the teams can finagle it. The Patriots have a ton of money. They have a ton of quote unquote cap room. I am all for overpaying this player to entice him to come to New England, to give them a building block. And I say that knowing that I'm not even sure this guy is a true number one receiver. I mean, he's a number one in the sense that there are 32 receivers in the league, and he's probably one of the best 30 receivers. This isn't Jamar Chase or Stephon Diggs. This is yet. I mean, so I don't know,
No, and I agree completely. I think that's kind of the big way that I look at this is I say it would be great to get Brandon Aiyuk. I wonder what his true desire to come here other than money is. And when we've looked around the league, there's been times where that was really blown up in teams' faces. Like, I know, it's not necessarily the majority of times, but I think of guys like Kenny Golladay, right? Guys who came up, with a similar situation to Aiyuk, right? Really, exploded on the scene as a number one receiver, went and got a big bag of money, and then fell off the map, right? And that's the one thing I don't want to see happen. I want Brandon Aiyuk to come here if he genuinely wants to play here and wants to be a part of what we're doing. He's excited about Drake Maye and our young receivers and our new head coach and our ability to compete moving into the future. Obviously, part of that is going to be that he gets compensated what he thinks is fair and worth it coming here. But I don't want him just coming here to get the bag and check out. Like, I want a guy who wants to come here and compete as a Patriot.
So why bring him in? Why do this if you're the Patriots?
Why do it if you're the Patriots? I mean, if you're the Patriots, I think you got to get your young quarterback as much help as possible. Right. Honestly.
Agreed.
Right?
100% agreed. Like they don't have any, for all the questions I have about Aiyuk, and I do still have questions about him. And part of that is coming from that San Francisco program. There's just so much talent on that offense that I think it's hard to tell like who is the real talent versus who is just along for the ride. We've said before, everyone assumes that Brock Purdy is the beneficiary from all the players, but we don't know for sure.
No.
And I think it's hard to tease out like what's what when you have that many good players in one spot. And my fear is that this is going way back before your time. Like Alvin Harper, number 2 receiver on that Dallas Cowboys team from the early 90s, got a huge contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was putting up big numbers in that Dallas offense. Yeah. And then he went to Tampa Bay and he was one of the most notorious busts in NFL history because he really wasn't what it looked like he was. He was just the beneficiary of playing with Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and Jay Novacek and everything else on that team. And I worry a little bit about Aiyuk in that sense because I fear that he's been the beneficiary of just being immersed in talent.
Well, he's definitely been immersed in talent. I don't think there's any question about it. He's benefited from the fact that he's got Deebo Samuel on the other side of him. He's got Christian McCaffrey. He's got George Kittle. I don't think Aiyuk has actually demanded number one coverage, double team coverage like at any point in his career, right? Like he's always right.
And if he comes here, he's gonna be the double team. I mean, absolutely gonna be the focus of every defense they play.
Right. But I'm also wondering, does that help us out though? I mean, like, do we have a guy on this roster now that defenses need to worry about and scheme for, that they need to double team or throw extra bodies at?
Absolutely not.
It might not be the best thing for Aiyuk, but it might be great for us in terms of opening up the field a little bit.
Well, it's going to open up things for Pop Douglas and Hunter Henry and Ramondre Stevenson.
Exactly.
They're all going to benefit from that. And the Patriots are going to have to prove that they can beat teams with those other guys to open up things for Aiyuk.
Yes.
But Aiyuk is going to face a level of pressure and scrutiny being the number one in Foxborough that is very different from what he had, the arrangement he had in San Francisco. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt about it. And look, but if you're this guy with what you're asking for, you're asking to essentially be one of the highest paid receivers in the league. I think he's even asking to be the highest paid receiver in the NFL.
Right. Do you have a problem with the money, by the way? Because I definitely don't. I'm all for paying him.
I don't have a problem with
it's the last thing I'm worried about.
I don't have a problem with paying him the money. In principle, do I think he deserves to be paid as the highest wide receiver in football? I don't. But I don't have a problem with us giving him the money.
Right.
But yeah, that's really how.
But that's the go and market price now. You have to overpay to get these guys in, especially when you're, I hate to say this, a B-level franchise now, which the Patriots have somehow miraculously become almost overnight. Now with Belichick gone and everything, I mean, they have to overpay. So I have zero problem with the price. I think it's, they need to pony up the dough and pay for this guy.
Yeah, and you know what? Look, hopefully they will. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. I look at it and I say, though, as much as I could look and say that New England is not like an opportunity or a desirable destination maybe for Aiyuk, if the other opportunities are Cleveland and Pittsburgh, I look at that and I say, I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland division is much tougher. Right, it's going to be much tougher to compete in and get out of. I think that we've yet to see what the deal is with Deshaun Watson. We still haven't seen him be able to perform at full health and at full capacity.
I mean, you could argue the Steelers' quarterback situation is worse than the Patriots right now, easily.
Yeah,
and the Browns too.
Right.
I mean, really.
I think when you peel back the layers, the Patriots aren't as bad as it might seem on the surface if you're comparing those three options. But yeah, I think a lot of that too is hopefully, he feels like we're in a position where we're gearing up to grow and win. Because don't forget, this is a guy who spent the last 4 years since coming into the league, potentially competing for championships. Right. He's been in the NFC Championship, I believe, 3 out of the 4 years. He's been into 2 Super Bowls. This is a guy who wants to win. He wants to compete, right? He needs to know that we have a plan to compete in the short and long term.
Yeah. No doubt. And I think to me, Justin, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. This is not so much a move for this year as it is for maybe next year or the year after. But if you have the opportunity to get a player of Aiyuk's caliber in here for a reasonable price, then I think you do it. Yeah. But then the one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I think that we should mention is what is the reasonable price for Brandon Aiyuk? Because do I want the player here? Yes. Am I willing to pay big money if I'm the Patriots? Absolutely. I would do that in a second. Would I give up a first-round pick for Brandon Aiyuk? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The one thing the Patriots cannot do if they're going to bring in Brandon Aiyuk, they cannot give up the 2025 first-round pick because that is going to most likely be a high draft pick. Maybe the Patriots will exceed expectations this year. We don't know right now. No one can tell me there isn't a realistic chance that isn't a top 5 pick. And if you've got the chance to go draft a Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell or you pick your game-changing player right there, you cannot pass that up to bring in Brandon Aiyuk. So that to me is untouchable.
Yeah, I don't want to give that up at all. From what I heard, the Browns were potentially interested in swapping Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're the 49ers, right, what makes the most sense? You give up, if you're in win now mode, right, you give up someone like Aiyuk, who's obviously going to be better in the long term, but you could bring in an Amari Cooper who for 1 or 2 years should be just as serviceable and productive as an Aiyuk, and you could potentially get draft capital back for it. That to me seems like an attractive trade. I don't know if we could give somebody. I heard that our guy was potentially Kendrick Bourne. I mean, if you're the Browns, who would you rather get back, right? Would you rather get back Amari Cooper or Kendrick Bourne?
What about Matthew Judon, yeah. Kendrick Bourne in a second-round pick? Would you give up that?
It's a lot.
I would.
It's a lot.
I would give it up in a second.
Do you think, though, that Do you think though a second round pick is still high if you're including Bourne and Judon in that trade?
It might be a little high, but you're going to have to overpay, I think, to make the best offer. And like you said, I mean, yeah, Amari Cooper is an attractive piece to the 49ers because it's really not affecting their Super Bowl chances this year. You're subbing out Aiyuk, you're subbing in Cooper. It's almost like a wash. Now, one player's older, different spots in their career. Aiyuk obviously has more value because he's younger, but you know, you can still, if you're the 49ers, you can still argue to yourself, like, we bring in Amari Cooper, we're just as much a Super Bowl contender today as we were yesterday.
Exactly.
It's going to be much harder to make that argument with a draft pick in the future that the Patriots might offer. So you throw in Judon and you throw in Bourne, you know, maybe Bourne isn't quite as good a receiver as Aiyuk, but he's a decent receiver, and you're giving them a real piece on their defense that will help them contend this year.
Well, I'm curious too. I'd want to know. Obviously, they still got what's his name, the Bosa brother. But do they still have Chase Young from that? Remember the guy from Washington?
I think they do.
So I mean, where do you even does Judon go over there as a rotational player? I mean, you got three high-end defensive.
But Bosa can't stay healthy too. That's the other thing. That guy gets hurt all the time.
He does get hurt all the time. I mean, so maybe you bring someone like Judon in and shore up your defensive line and say, no matter what, we're going to be able to get after.
Right, and if you're a Super Bowl contender, I feel like you find a role for a guy like Matt Judon one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, Judon did start his career as an outside linebacker. He wasn't always, a down lineman.
Right.
So I mean, maybe you can.
But put Judon in that defense, and that becomes like it's already a special defense. It becomes an even more special defense if Matt Judon is on there. So I think that would be a competitive offer to the 49ers, maybe even a better offer than what the Browns could offer.
Yeah. Again, it really comes down to, like we said, like it's a two-part offer, right? It's partly, can we make the most attractive offer to the Browns, and can we make the most attractive offer to Aiyuk? And you have to win both categories, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think it probably won't happen.
Right.
Because it just feels like there's long odds in too many places. Like, you've got to make the best offer to the Niners. You've got to make the best offer to Aiyuk. You got to get his buy-in on board. You don't have a lot to offer him. You're projected to be one of the worst teams in the league. In fact, I feel like there's just too many roadblocks to make it happen. I feel like someone will swoop in at the last minute and make a competitive offer that the 49ers can feel good about, and Aiyuk will go to a place that he actually wants to be, will be able to contend, win, and produce this year.
Yeah. And again, I'm wondering genuinely how much the interest in these 2 to 3 teams that we've heard about are just strictly because their willingness to pay him, and how much of it is his willingness to want to be a part of those organizations. Yeah. That's something we don't know yet.
That's something we don't know yet. Right. But you have to figure Aiyuk must be placing a lot of emphasis on getting paid if he's even considering Patriots, Browns, or Steelers.
Yeah.
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 Right. Because why else go there?
Exactly.
Okay. Let's shift gears. We'll see what happens over the next few days with the Brandon Aiyuk situation. It's going to be interesting to watch it play out, and hopefully, unlikely will happen and Aiyuk will end up here. I want to talk, Justin, a little bit about the quarterback competition, and a lot has actually happened in the last 7 days since we last discussed this. The first thing that I think has happened is Drake Maye's training camp performance has improved. And I take that as a positive sign, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there are quarterbacks in this league that come in and they have deficiencies in their game, and 1 year, 2 years, 3 years later, they have the same deficiencies in the game they had their first week of training camp.
Yep.
Look at Zach Wilson. He's the same player, bad player he was the first day he walked into Florham Park in New York, right? The fact that Maye has already showing signs of progress and looks like a better quarterback after 1 week of practice, to me, is a real positive sign.
But yeah, for me, I'm definitely excited to see Drake Maye improve. I think one of the big things, again, I was not worried about it, right? Like we had talked about, all off season heading into camp, it's going to take some time for Drake Maye, presumably, right? He wasn't playing at, the highest level for schools, right? He came out of North Carolina. Like, he wasn't the most experienced quarterback in college. Like, it was going to be a learning curve. And he's coming into an organization that's, kind of rebuilding themselves. They got a bunch of new faces, a bunch of young guys on offense, brand new head coach and offensive coordinator. I fully expected it to take some time for Drake Maye to start to look good. You know what I mean? I'm glad that he is on that trajectory now. He is kind of turning it up a little bit, but I never really expected Drake Maye to come out guns blazing and win the job at the beginning of camp. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that the plan was that it was going to be a long-term thing. And if you look at everything that's happened in camp thus far, in spite of the fact that Drake Maye has improved, in spite of the fact that he looks much better already, and in spite of the fact he may be the most talented, he is the most talented of the bunch, it seems like the job is Brissett's. Everything that's happened in training camp thus far is pointing to the fact that Jacoby Brissett and not Drake Maye is going to be the starting quarterback. And it just feels right now, Justin, like the plan all along was for Brissett to be the guy, really, no matter what happened in camp.
Yeah, and look, if you go back to our really early offseason episodes, right?
Yeah.
We said we were glad that the Patriots brought in Jacoby Brissett because we wanted a reliable bridge quarterback, a veteran, somebody that could come in and literally do just that, bridge the gap, right? I think we all said that it would be nice if Drake Maye was ready to start week one. Yeah. But look, if Drake Maye's not ready to start week one, I'm okay with that. I want the best quarterback to be out there in week one.
Do you feel like, though, this has been a legitimate quarterback competition and that the Patriots have even entertained the possibility that Maye could be the starter in week one? Because it seems to me more like that this was really Brissett's job from the get-go, and they really haven't given Maye a real chance to win this job, even if he is the best guy.
Well, I think you're right. I think Brissett was brought in here to be that guy. I think that was the day one plan within the organization. But look, as we've seen in professional sports all the time, not even just the NFL, talent and performance creates opportunity, right? Yeah. So, I mean, look, if Drake Maye came in here and made it an undoubtable fact that he is the best quarterback, he should be the day one starter, he is ready to go on day one, then I think why hold him back? But I think he's shown that he has potential, but he hasn't done anything to come in and say, no, the guy that you brought in here to be the bridge quarterback that you originally planned on started week one, I'm getting rid of him. I'm coming in here.
So do you think this is over? Like September, 8th in Cincinnati, it's 100% Jacoby Brissett right now.
I don't think it's 100%, but I think right now things are going according to the original plan.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'd put it 80-20. I don't think it's over yet.
Right.
I think there's too much camp left for me to say it's over. And what I would say is that C.J. Stroud, no one thought he was going to be the Texans' week one starter at this point in camp last year. Everyone thought Davis Mills was going to hold that job for a little while. Yeah. And I believe Stroud won that job later in camp. Stroud had it, by the way, epically bad training camp last year.
Right.
I mean, the word bust we even said the word bust when we recorded last summer. So it's too much left to go, but I will say it just feels an awful lot like they're really not giving, it doesn't feel like they're giving equal footing to both guys. It feels like more that Brissett's the guy and Maye would have to do something super extraordinary to win the job. And it sounds like you're okay with that. Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it as long as that's what the circumstances dictate. Yeah. I wouldn't be okay with it if Drake Maye was, turning heads on a regular basis and the general consensus was, how do you hold this guy off the field?
Right.
You know what I mean? But if he's improving, needs to work on stuff, TBD, I'm okay with Jacoby Brissett starting week one.
See, I guess I feel a little differently. Like, I feel like, first of all, as a fan, I don't know if I want to see Jacoby Brissett play now that we have Drake Maye. And I know what I said when we signed Jacoby Brissett. I said the opposite. It changed when we drafted Drake Maye. And this being the Drake Maye era, I want to see Drake Maye as a fan. The Patriots can't make decisions based on their emotions. So they can't put Drake Maye in there just because people want to see them. And I know that. But what I will say is that I think you could legitimately say that by not playing Maye with the starters, you're maybe slowing or halting his development a little bit. And that's my concern. I kind of think if Maye is in any way capable of getting out on that field and surviving, he should be put out there, roll with the punches, take the lumps, and develop. Because that's what this year is all about, Justin. It's all about Drake May's development.
It is all about Drake May's development. But I mean, let me ask you something like this. Let's go back to the Brandon Aiyuk situation for a second. If you were to try to bring in a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, right? What's your pitch to him that, hey, we're going to put Drake May out there no matter what because it's the best thing for his development, or we're going to make sure that the best quarterback that we have is on the field?
Well, if you're Brandon Aiyuk, don't you feel more excited about Drake May and playing with the number 3 pick in the draft than a known journeyman whose ceiling is already well defined in the league?
I would if I thought that number 3 pick was currently better than that journeyman, I guess. Look, I feel like we're talking about long-term potential or upside potential versus like the fact of the matter right now. And like I think the fact of the matter right now is that we can't definitively say that Drake May is the best option to go out there and play quarterback.
No, we can't say that right now, but I think whose ceiling is higher?
Drake May's. It's got to
right
be.
now.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. Until you know otherwise. So,
right.
So like my thing is, even if Drake May isn't the best guy for now, put him out there because he will be or he should be the best guy in the next year at some point. And if he's not, then guess what? You're screwed anyways.
I agree. I mean, look, if we're talking about from a fan standpoint, let me ask you this, right? What plays better with the fans? You start Jacoby Brissett, maybe he struggles a little bit. Drake May kind of rounds into form, and then you get an injection of Drake May at some point in maybe like the beginning, midway point of the season, and now you got your rookie quarterback to look forward to the rest of the year. Or you start with Drake May, maybe he gets the break speed off him the first half of the season, and then you have to turn to a Jacoby Brissett.
But what about a third option, which is you start Jacoby Brissett and you're okay. You win like 6, 7, 8 games. You're hovering a game below 500 all year. You can't bench him because you're still competitive, but you are not going anywhere with Jacoby Brissett. Now you're painted into a corner. You have to worry about your locker room, and you've done nothing to develop your young quarterback. I mean, at the end of the day, this season is about Drake May's development. I mean, I would personally, there's a major caveat to this we haven't mentioned yet, and I want to bring it up now, which is like, to me, the real reason that this job is being given to Jacoby Brissett right now has nothing to do with anything directly on the field in terms of Brissett versus May, but what it really has to do with is the fact that this team is not ready yet for Drake May. And putting Drake May out there early in the season is probably going to be detrimental to his development. And I think that's what the Patriots think, because if you're asking me what I would want to do, I want to throw Drake May out there and let him develop. And that's fine if you have the pieces in place that development process can actually happen in a positive and productive way. This team might be so bad in September and October that might not be possible. And my sense is, Justin, the reason why Brissett has sort of been ordained in training camp as the starter is because they know that they're not ready yet for Drake May.
So I agree with that. And I think part of what that kind of segues nicely into is what if, we're talking about, it's all about Drake May's development, right? But let's not forget, we have an offense, where the offensive line still needs to come together and round into form. We got a lot of question marks in terms of what's going to happen with that offensive line.
It's a major issue.
It's a major issue.
Do you want to put a rookie quarterback behind this garbage offensive line?
Exactly. And by the same token, you got a bunch of young first and second year wide receivers, right? So do you run the risk of, by making the development all about Drake May right off the bat and putting Drake May out there in day one, that you're actually hindering the development of 2 other significant areas of your offense that you need serious development with, and that's your offensive line and your receiver group? Because I think Jacoby Brissett, if he's more competent with his veteran skill set right off the bat, he's ready to go for week 1, he might be putting the rest of the offense in a better position to develop and prepare for Drake.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point. And I think that's part of it too. It's like, as much as the Patriots aren't ready for May, the other side, the other way of that is also true, which is like you have other developmental groups that will benefit from having a stable, experienced veteran presence. We know Jacoby Brissett is a journeyman. That's well established, and we know what his ceiling is. But just having someone in there that like knows the right calls and has played in the league and knows what to do, that's going to allow this line to develop and this receiver group to develop in a way that then makes it possible for at some point Maye to step out there and not have it be a total disaster.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
right.
That's a great point. No, I agree with that. So maybe, I think all these reasons are why that you're seeing why it's like, it just feels like it's Brissett's job.
Right.
They're not really giving a real legitimate quarterback competition because I think they know everything that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
The one thing I will push back on, I heard some talk this week that Van Pelt and Gerard Mayo are going with Brissett because he's the safe option for them. And I would disagree with that because, look, their whole career is hinging on Drake Maye. Let's be honest. They need to do what's right for Drake Maye.
Yeah.
And developing Drake Maye, if that happens and he becomes a top quarterback in this league, Gerard Mayo is going to be a successful coach. It doesn't matter. We've seen a lot of bum coaches look really good with great quarterbacks on their team, So like players make coaches, generally speaking, not the other way around. Trust me, Mayo and Van Pelt, they will do whatever it takes to develop Maye. And they probably feel legitimately right now like that means putting him on the sideline for a few weeks at the beginning and letting this all play out. But you know what I would say to that, Justin, is that sucks. Because if your team is that bad, you can't put your rookie quarterback in, that really sucks. And that just shows you what a terrible position they're in, that you can't even take your quarterback and put him out there with your starters and feel like you can have a process of development and a guy actually grow into the role because the team is so bad.
I agree. And I think to the point of everything you just said, the worst thing that I think could happen for the New England Patriots, out of all the things that potentially go wrong, with this team, with this organization this year, heading into next year, I think the worst thing would be needing to go back to the well to find another quarterback.
Yep.
Right?
Agreed.
That's the worst thing that could happen. So I think if you're this team, I think maybe that strategy of delaying Drake Maye's presence in the football field is part of, like we were saying, make sure that the team is in the best position possible to get Drake Maye out there, right? And make sure that we're working him in, growing him, making sure he's comfortable with everything so that he doesn't completely go out there and flame out and Patriots fans, owners, management isn't going, well, that clearly didn't work out. We got to figure something else out moving on to next year, right? And I think that would be the worst possible scenario. So as much as it sucks for us right now in this moment, I don't hate with their kind of ease-in approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the nature versus nurture thing for quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
What there are guys that are going to be successful no matter where they go. You like your Patrick Mahomes is, or those kind of players, Aaron Rodgers. And then there's going to be players that are complete flameouts no matter where they go. And I do think there's a lot of guys in the middle that the circumstance really matters.
Yeah.
And I think you can look back through, and that goes both ways, through the league over the last 30 years. And you could say if this guy went to this situation, his career might have turned out very differently one way or the other.
Yep.
Look at Brock Purdy in San Francisco. If he comes to Carolina, is he a borderline MVP candidate? I highly doubt it, right? Even though I think he's a good quarterback. So, you raise a fair point. The only thing I would push back on that a little is like at some point, I think one of the real goals for this season has to be we need answers for what Drake Maye is. And we need to have a sense of what we have in Foxborough with Drake Maye. The Patriots do not want to have as much of a question mark, I think, surrounding Drake Maye next year as they do this year. If this guy looks like he can't play, it's better to find that out sooner rather than later. If you feel like you have something, same is true. At some point this year, I do think he has to get in there.
No, I agree. And look, one of the last things you want to do is wind up, because we don't have the luxury of time. You don't want to be the Buffalo Bills where it takes till year 3 for you to bring in a superstar wide receiver, to equip your quarterback, to get him up to speed, to figure out what you truly have, right? Like, we want to know this year, next year by the latest, what the deal is with Drake Maye in terms of his potential as a franchise quarterback. So gonna go back to the Aiyuk thing again. I really do hope that they get somebody like Aiyuk in here sooner rather than later, get him some help. Because the last thing I want is for this season to go by, we still don't know what the deal is with Drake Maye. And then everyone's like, oh, well, we can't truly judge him until we bring in a number one wide receiver.
That's a great point. All the more reason why they need to be as aggressive as possible in bringing in Aiyuk, because you're right. I mean, it's going to be hard to get a real test or a real window into what Drake Maye is if you're putting him out there with really the worst team in the league in terms of skill position talent.
Yep.
All right, let's talk, Justin, a little bit about the game on Thursday night. We're actually going to see preseason football, Thursday night, Panthers versus the Patriots in Foxborough. Already been said, Bryce Young not going to play in this game. So this game is really going to be about Patriots, position battles, development, like that first preseason always is. What are you looking to see in this first game? What I'm going to say about that is that I want this Patriots team to take the preseason way more seriously than they have the last 4 years. They have had 4 bad starts in a row. I think that they cannot afford to take the preseason lightly, given the way that they've come out of camp the last 4 or 5 years. I know it's a new coach. I feel like they took training camp a little more seriously this year, and I want them to take the preseason more seriously.
Well, I do too. And I don't know if you heard Gerard Mayo's comments, but when he was asked if Drake Maye was going to be playing in the preseason game, and he basically said, look, anybody who's healthy is going to be out there.
And I like that approach.
I like that too. And I think that speaks to the sense of urgency to get these guys out there, get some snaps under their belt, and really not only start to evaluate who we are as a team, but get these guys ready to come out in week 1 and play. So I like that approach. I think the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is obviously the low-hanging fruit is going to be to say Drake Maye coming in and seeing how he performs. I'm more curious how this wide receiver room starts to shake out. I want to see, who our starting guys are. We got veterans like Juju and Kendrick Bourne, where we kind of know who they are and what their upside potential is, right? But then we get some guys that we're really excited about. Super excited about Pop Douglas, super excited about Jalen Polk, super excited about Javon Baker. Like those guys, I want to see how they get into the mix. I want to see who the first team looks like it's shaping out to be. That's really what I'm curious about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, and you might disagree with this, but short of Drake Maye, there is not one person on this roster that I'm really afraid to lose to an injury for even the season or the rest of the year. Like there are guys that I think they need, and it will hurt them if they lose.
Right.
But there's no one on this roster that I feel like if they lose this player, it's going to take them from being a good team to a bad team.
Right.
So I feel like you got to go out there and just like put all these guys out there at these key positions, like you said, wide receiver, and just like let them battle it out.
Yeah, exactly. So, and honestly, I'm kind of over. I'm over Juju Smith-Schuster. Like I hope they cut him. To be completely honest,
they might.
I want to see these young guys. I want to get them in the mix. I'm hearing a lot of good things about them at camp, right? Let's see what we really have. Like let's unleash them, because I mean, what's the worst that it's not the same as a quarterback. Let's let these young receivers get out there and let's see what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I agree with that. And they have a lot of depth at that wide receiver position. And there's definitely going to be, ironically, because they don't have good players at the top, but they have depth at the bottom, and there are going to be guys that are probably NFL-worthy players that don't make this team.
Yeah,
and Juju Smith-Schuster might be one of them. So I mean, that's all I really have to say about Thursday night. Like it's preseason game 1. I'm curious how Mayo approaches the game. I think that it will tell a lot about the season, and I mean, it will be interesting to see if Mayo takes it more seriously than Belichick.
It will be very interesting to see if Mayo takes it more seriously than Belichick. But all indications are that he's going to.
Yeah.
So I feel good about that so far.
Yeah, I do. And I think we're all kind of watching to get a sense of what Gerard Mayo is, and if he's really the players coach, like we've been told he is. I'm starting to question that narrative about that as well. But I think the way this camp has gone has kind of gone counter to that.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see, what happens in this preseason. I mean, Belichick turned the preseason into a mockery the last few years. All his brilliance as a coach. I mean, let's face it, like they took these were JV scrimmages the last 4 or 5 years with Belichick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Unwatchable JV scrimmages, like literally unwatchable crap.
Yes.
Okay, let's move to around the league, Justin, unless you got anything else you want to add about Patriots training camp.
No, yeah, let's do it.
All right, I want to start with just the NFL top 100 list that came out this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked when I saw the list. And the reason why I was shocked is because Patrick Mahomes was not number one. In fact, he was not even the number one quarterback.
Yeah.
On a list voted by his peers, by NFL players, Patrick Mahomes was number 4, and Lamar Jackson was ahead of him. I find it stunning.
It was Lamar Jackson, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I don't find that Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey being ahead of Mahomes as stunning, because those are guys that are at the top of their position. But the thought struck me thinking about this week is there another quarterback in the league that has shown that they can elevate their team the way Patrick Mahomes has? Lamar Jackson has not. I'm sorry, he has not. He hasn't won in the postseason. He's been surrounded by talent. He has not taken his team to that next level. Look at what Mahomes did this year with a subpar collection of offensive talent. He took that team on his back in the postseason, very Tom Brady-like, frankly, and got them to a Super Bowl, and they happened to win that Super Bowl on Mahomes' back. You go down that list, Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, all these guys that we say are top quarterbacks. You can go through the list. I don't know if there's one guy on that list that has taken his team and been able to prove that he can produce and win with mediocre or sub-mediocre talent around them besides Patrick Mahomes.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking in the last 4 years, right? We haven't had a quarterback other than Mahomes or Tom Brady win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, Stafford.
Right? Stafford won one. Yeah, Stafford.
Yep.
Yeah. So I would say Stafford, I think, you have to put at the top of that list. I'm going to put Joe Burrow at the top of that list too, just because I think, look, he took him to a Super Bowl. He took him back to an AFC championship and was one dumb penalty away from potentially going back there, right? Like, I think Joe Burrow has proved, he's the only one to beat Mahomes in the playoffs besides Brady. He's gone into Buffalo and dismantled them.
But look at the teams that Burrow has had.
Oh,
he still hasn't been able to win a Super Bowl.
For sure. And so that's what I'm saying. No, Burrow's not even in the same argument as Mahomes.
Right.
But if there's two quarterbacks that I think you could point to that have directly elevated their team, it's Stafford and Burrow. But Burrow hasn't won the ultimate championship, right? And neither of them are in the same conversation with Patrick Mahomes.
I can't put Matt Stafford on that list because he wasn't able to elevate his team in Detroit. I mean, there was a lot of losing, a lot of disappointing years, sub 500 seasons for Matt Stafford in Detroit. And then he goes to a much better operation in LA and he wins a ring. Hey, great. Not everyone can do that, but I can't say that he's of that Mahomesian level or anywhere near it where he can elevate the team. I just don't think he did that. The only guy, if I had to take one other guy and put him in that stratosphere, and I would not put him on the same level as Mahomes, it would be Josh Allen, because Josh Allen has shown through his play and his production that he can pick up that whole Buffalo team. However, he did not do anything before Stephon Diggs got there. And now we're going to have a huge litmus test for Josh Allen this year to see if he can do it without a number one receiver like Mahomes did.
Right. Yeah. Funny how, Mahomes, you get rid of Tyreek Hill and he goes on and wins 2 straight, right? And I think that's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm saying. What other quarterback in the league could do that? No one.
No one. Yeah. And I think Mahomes is truly showing that he's the class of the NFL now. He is the new Tom Brady. He is the new unstoppable force that everybody's got to be worried about. And he is in a class of his own. I really would like to see a couple of other quarterbacks step up and and try to accomplish that. But as of right now, it just seems, to your point, like I can't really pick anybody that I'm super confident in doing that. Like if you had to say, hey, who's the next man up?
Right.
I don't know.
And that's why when we talked about this a little last week, when we talk about quarterback contracts, and it's like, hey, nobody has won anything besides Mahomes. No one has proven they can elevate their team to a championship besides Mahomes. So when you criticize these contracts, and it's like, remember, you're comparing them a lot of times to other guys that haven't done what you're saying that player hasn't done. Like Dak Prescott threw 36 touchdowns last year, won a division title, and lost in the first round of the playoffs. That sounds a lot like Lamar Jackson type stuff. You know what I mean? So why is Lamar Jackson a great contract and Dak Prescott would be a bad one? I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I don't get it either. I think the Lamar being ranked above Mahomes is just completely egregious. I think there's probably a little bit of element of maybe jealousy going into that.
Do you think
vote,
Mahomes might not be well liked? Like that was one thing I thought of. Is he seen as arrogant? Is he seen as, I don't know.
I will say this, like after seeing him a little bit, like, did you watch that QB documentary that was on Netflix?
Yeah.
I gotta say, man, he came off as like super unlikable and arrogant in that, and I wonder if that arrogance combined with his success is pushing some of his non-teammates away from him.
That is the only possible explanation, because how could you logically argue that Lamar Jackson is a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes? It has to be that people didn't vote for him because they don't like him.
Right. And that's the only thing. I mean, yes, Lamar Jackson won the MVP last year, but that was questionable. He had a question. Like his MVP caliber year was not even that great of a year.
It wasn't.
So
I had him as my fantasy quarterback. Right. It was a frustrating year.
Me too. Yeah, exactly. It was super frustrating. So I don't think the guy even really played truly at an MVP caliber level. Like we said, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. Directly got knocked out by Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, there's just nothing in my mind that can justify why he would be ahead of Mahomes in that list.
It totally belies common sense, and that means there had to be some other external factor.
It does, and you know what? I understand you saying that Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill are a little bit of a different argument, but for me, as of right now, moving forward, if you're naming whatever the top, however many players in the NFL, that list has to start with Patrick Mahomes every time. And number 2 is where you can start to debate.
I said it was more understandable, not that I agree with.
No, right.
Because you're right. I mean, the list has to begin with Patrick Mahomes.
It has to. And if it doesn't, him being 4th to me is just crazy.
By the way, since you brought up his name, we aren't going to talk fantasy football today. We should at some point, but Christian McCaffrey is like the consensus number 1 fantasy football pick this year. What do you think about that? I think that's like,
I think
it's a little scary.
I'm not going to touch him with the 10-foot pole. He actually, I believe it was either today or yesterday, I just saw he strained his calf.
Yep.
He's going to be sidelined for a bit. That's the Christian McCaffrey that I remember for the last 5 years. I feel like last year he kind of had like a fluky year where he was able to stay healthy. Not taking anything away from the guy. When he is healthy, I think he's the most dominant running back in football. But the guy's getting older. He's proven that health is an issue for him. And I saw a stat too that players that deal with injuries in the training camp and in the offseason are so much worse set up when it comes to the regular season.
Right.
So,
McCaffrey is one of these guys that is going to fall off the proverbial cliff. I don't know if it will be this year or next year or when, but he's got a ton of miles on him. He's got an injury history as much as any player in recent memory in the league. And I think that he's over 30, if I'm not mistaken, at this point. We know what happens to running backs when they get to that point.
Yeah.
I wouldn't touch McCaffrey either. I pass on him in fantasy this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely want to pass on him. I think, look, if you're going to take a running back, I go Bijan or Breece Hall before I take McCaffrey.
I think the Breece Hall one, though, that's a little puzzling to me, too. I'm not sure what he's done. I know he's on a good team, but
he was hyped up pretty big coming out of college. I mean, when he came out before his ACL injury, he looked like he was going to be the next guy. I mean, he came back last year, still first year off the ACL. It's a little bit slow, but I think he showed that, if he's healthy, he could be good.
Yeah, but
sure.
honestly, the play this year is just don't take a running back in the first round.
I agree.
Take something solid. Take one of the top wide receivers. Even take a quarterback, and then you're going to take those gambles on running backs. Guarantee you, there's going to be great running backs available in the 3rd through 8th round this year.
Oh, I agree. This is the perfect year to go for a late RB draft strategy. I mean, I already know. I got the 3rd pick in my big draft. I'm 100% going wide receiver.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's talk a little. We're going to preview the NFC West, Justin, before we wrap it up. I got a couple questions for you about each of these teams. I'm going to start with the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
And one of the stories in the league this year in training camp thus far has been the strong start of J.J. McCarthy in the Minnesota training camp. On a practice field, granted, but he's looked really good in Minnesota so far. Maybe he has a chance at that starting job. How relevant is it that J.J. McCarthy has had a fast start in shells and pads in training camp practices?
Well, first off, I don't know if you saw today, but I believe Sam Darnold was listed on the first depth chart as the number 1, as the starter. So they are. As of right now, it looks like Sam Darnold is going to be the starter. But you're right. J.J. McCarthy has looked really good, or at least decent for a rookie. Yeah. I mean, look, he's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Jordan Addison. But I think it's super important for Minnesota that he kind of stepped in because, look, you just locked up Justin Jefferson on a long-term deal. You got these rookies in there. You took a big step back from Kirk Cousins. And I think the big thing that I think Vikings fans want to know is, can we still compete with what we have? Because they've been a team that, look, they haven't done much damage, but they've been a good competitor the last couple of years, the Vikings. I mean, they've been knocking at the door of the playoffs. They've been in the playoffs a couple times. They've been a tough opponent in the schedule. And so you need to be able to still show that you can compete. Your division's getting better. I mean, the Packers and the Lions have obviously taken steps forward. You don't want to be moving backwards when you have so many guys on that roster that are young or in their prime. You don't want to waste their careers.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I mean, I'll say this even too about the situation. Like, I'm kind of calling bullshit on this, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about training camp, not even in the preseason. We're talking about training camp. The guy is on a team that is absolutely stacked. Of course he's going to look okay. Can we just see him do it in a couple games before we actually get, even preseason games, before we actually get excited about J.J. McCarthy or start to say that, this guy is a good quarterback? He's still a rookie. He hasn't even taken the field yet once. I think it's total BS. And I will actually make this call now about the Minnesota Vikings. They will deeply regret letting Kirk Cousins walk away this year by the end of this year. Because for all his flaws, he brought stability and production, and he had that team in contention. I don't think it's going to happen right away with McCarthy. I think like any rookie quarterback, it's going to be a process for him this year. Yeah. And I think that, the early start, the honeymoon, it's all just BS. The reality is that team still doesn't have a quarterback. They're going to miss Kirk Cousins this year. And I put them, honestly, bottom of that division.
Yeah. I could easily see them coming in last in that division. I think the Packers and the Lions easily finish ahead of them.
Yep.
And I think the Bears are making a great case as to why they could as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no doubt.
yeah.
I mean, I'm no fan of the Bears, but they're going to be right at the bottom with the Bears. I'll put it that way.
Exactly. Coming into this year, the Vikings have been a clear step or two ahead of the Bears. Now I'm not so sure who's got the upper hand in one another.
Right. Okay. Now let's move on to the Bears because that's my next question. There is so much buzz and hype around Caleb Williams. I've never seen anything like it. I don't believe in the player. I think it was a bad pick.
Me too.
I think he's going to be a bust. All that said, I feel sorry for him because there is a level of expectation around Caleb Williams now that is completely unfair to put on any rookie quarterback. This is still the NFL. He is still a rookie. It's still really hard to transition from college to the pros as a quarterback. Anything that happens to Caleb Williams this year, I'm not going to totally declare him a bust yet, because it would be unfair to do so. But there are people out there predicting him to make the playoffs, to make the Pro Bowl, to have a 4,000 yard season for the first time for the Bears. These are all the things you're hearing about routinely coming out of Chicago. My question to you, Justin, is what happens if Caleb Williams does not have a good year? What happens if he fails this year? What does that mean?
Well, if he fails this year, I mean, I think it's obviously devastating for Chicago. The one thing that I'll say that Chicago has done a nice job of is building up the team around him, right? Where they've still put themselves in a position where if they needed to go out and get another quarterback, they have a great group of wide receivers, right? They've rebuilt that offensive line. The defense is hopefully starting to round into form and started to pick up. Last year after they traded for Montez Sweat, I think the Bears as an organization have taken a bunch of steps forward. But like you said, that linchpin is Caleb Williams, right? And if it doesn't work out with him, I think Chicago is just going to be in a world of hurt, more so mentally than I think as a team. Like as the team's talent, like that's still a talented roster, but I think it would just be so deflating.
Right.
For everybody.
Well, I'm going to push back a little because this is what I'm going to say. What will it mean, and what will people think it means, and what does it really mean? If Caleb Williams has a bad rookie season, to me that means nothing. It is not an indictment on him in any way. We have seen countless great quarterbacks come in and struggle in their rookie year.
That's true.
I push back also on the narrative that the Bears are like this super team that anyone could just plug into and be a good quarterback. DJ Moore is an okay receiver. This isn't Randy Moss. Keenan Allen's on the back nine of his career. Rome Odunze, I think, is a stud. He's a rookie. I love the DeAndre Swift signing. Guys like that are a dime a dozen in the league right now. So it's a good team. It's a good landing spot for a rookie quarterback. We've discussed that in the past. But I'm not going to go so far as to say that this is like, the 1999 Rams, like a bunch of Hall of Famers. Like some people are making it sound. And Caleb Williams can just plop right down in the middle of that and make a Pro Bowl and lead them to the playoffs. It means nothing if Caleb Williams struggles this year, in my opinion, because he's a rookie and he's entitled to a development process. It's my 2 cents.
Yep. No, he's super entitled, but I feel like most of this crap surrounding Caleb Williams is brought on by himself, right? His attitude in college, the fact that he was making millions of dollars a year, the fact that he was, a little bit of a problem in terms of his trash talk, the way he would go out on social media or in interviews and just sound super pompous and arrogant. Yep. I mean, the guy, the way he speaks about himself, the way he carries himself, the way he conducts himself in front of the media, he is just boosting those expectations through the roof. So he's partly to blame for why they're so high, I think.
I agree with that. And it's also, too, it's not all to blame on him, but he just has a odd personality. He does not fit the mold of what you would expect for like a superstar athlete and certainly a superstar quarterback. And I think that it added all up and it just makes for a very weird kind of odd dynamic in Chicago.
It does. I mean, I saw mixed reviews in this, but do you hear the story about him, yelling at the veterans in the locker room to pick up their trash? And be whatever it was. But he, as a rookie, you come in, you start barking out orders at veterans in preseason before you've proven yourself or done anything. I mean, you better be damn sure you go out and back it up because you can lose the locker room real quick if you try to overstep and be the big dog, but you don't perform like the big dog.
Yeah, or even just as a rookie. I mean, I feel like there's a way you come in as a rookie to a team full of veterans and you can be a leader but not be overbearing or overstep your place. And look at, this is obviously an extreme example, but look at how Brady came in. All the established veterans on this team left over from the late 90s, the Super Bowl run in 96. One of the reasons they came in and were so successful early on. But Brady had to fill a role on the team. He had to find a way to play in the sandbox with your Lawyer Malloys and your Ty Laws and your Willie McGinnis and your Ted Johnsons and all your strong veteran personalities that you had on that team. And even though Brady was a natural alpha and a leader, he was able to find that simpatico with those guys, right? So when you're Caleb Williams and you come in and you just are, overstepping your bounds, asking guys to pick up trash, coming off like you're distant, like you're aloof, like you're, almost like a Kyrie Irving type vibe that he gives off, right?
Yes,
it's
very
like
much.
It feels like it's just not a good setup for him to be successful. His lessons might be as much off the field as on the field in some ways too.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, look, from all accounts, people have been saying that he looks pretty good in training camp, right? I mean, I hope that I actually really hope that Caleb Williams is good, because I think it's good for the league if Caleb Williams is good and if the Bears are good.
Agreed.
Right? Like, I'm not rooting. I don't want the guy to be bad, but like, he makes it tough to root for him.
He does. He really like Kyrie Irving.
Right. Like a Kyrie Irving. So
Kyrie Irving has said some really stupid things. I don't think he's a bad person.
Right.
But he's hard to root for.
Exactly. And if you're Caleb Williams, I mean, you got to walk a very fine line between, especially like we said, it's a rookie year. There's growing pains your rookie year, and he is entitled to that the whatever it is that comes with being a rookie, right? Like, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but
it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows.
But
people expect it to be. And that's what makes this a dangerous situation.
And you compound the negative the blowback and the negative repercussions if you have that aloofness and that attitude and that unlikability to you. It buys you less time.
I agree. I agree with that 1,000%. And this is all why it's so unfair for people to say the Bears are gonna make the playoffs and anything less is a disappointment, because Caleb Williams has a lot to learn about playing quarterback, and he has a lot to learn about being a quarterback in a locker room full of men. And he's entitled a couple years, I believe, to have that process. And what we're asking for him as a national media, as a sports viewing public now, is that he should not have that process. And I just don't think that's reasonable or fair to ask him. Okay, last one. Oh, two more. I'm sorry. Let's move to Green Bay Packers. And they finished the year extremely strong last year. We've talked about them, I think, a few weeks ago. You mentioned them. It just seems a little bit too hunky-dory in Green Bay. Jordan Love was absolutely torrid coming down the stretch, 21 touchdowns, 1 pick. Why, Justin, do I feel like, even though there's so much hype around that team and expectation around that team, around Jordan Love, why do I feel like they're taking a major step back this year?
Because I think a lot of people may think it was fluky.
Almost too easy, it feels
too
like, right?
easy.
Yeah.
Especially because, and look, I don't think we were the only two people who thought this. Prior to last year, we were very negative on Jordan Love.
Yep. 100%.
I didn't think from what I had seen from him, I wasn't super impressed, right? I didn't think he was a guy who was going to come in and have the year that he had last year. And I think the eye test tells me that I'm slightly skeptical about his ability to repeat it and do it again.
Yeah.
So
it's just what we saw from him in those first 3 years was every time he got in the game, it wasn't just bad. It was awful.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he comes in and he actually starts looking pretty good. And you're like, okay, this guy, maybe he can play. And then he catches on fire in the second half last year. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's just like everyone's expecting them to pick it up where they left off. I don't know. It just feels too easy. It feels like when everyone is thinking that's going to happen, that's when the crash comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely – look, I don't think it's going to be that easy at all. I could see them taking a step back. I do still think the Packers are a good young team. I like LaFleur. Like, I think he's a great coach. Yeah.
And I mean, that's an asset.
It's a big asset. So, like, I think that's an all-around good team, and I think they have every reason to be good. But to your point, it's not that easy to just pick it up and start the year on fire.
I mean, at some point, like, you have that sophomore slump, right? That's sophomore slump that a lot of players have. That's where the term comes from, right? And I think that Jordan Love, for some strange reason, I think he's a bad. I think he'll be a good quarterback down the road. I think he hits a sophomore slump this year.
I could see that. And look, I think it'll tell us a lot about Jordan Love, his mental characteristics and his intangibles, right? Because last year, you come in, there's almost no expectations for you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? He comes in with no expectations, and he does well. He leaps right over the bar. This year, after the way he finished last year, after signing a contract and becoming the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, all eyes are on him now.
Yep.
The expectations are through the roof. It's not the same game.
It's not. And just to give maybe a bad analogy, but look at Mac Jones and what he did. You know,
Yes.
he came in his rookie year, low expectations, won the job, had a very respectable year,
Yep.
got this team to the playoffs, and then completely fell apart when he had to face adversity in that second year. And I think psychologically never really recovered from that. You hit on an important thing, which is when Jordan Love hits that sophomore slump, how is he going to respond to it and face that adversity and ultimately, presumably, emerge a better player from it? Not everyone does. You have a lot of players that come in like your Mac Joneses, who come in, have a cup of tea of success in the league, and then fall apart. That'll be the real test for Jordan Love. Okay, he belongs on an NFL field. He's not Zach Wilson. Before we laugh at that, let's not forget that for 3 years, we thought he was Zach Wilson, right? He showed last year he's not Zach Wilson, but that doesn't mean he isn't Mac Jones or Robert Griffin or any number of guys that have come in and had a year or two of success and then didn't really take it to that next level.
Exactly. So look, he's just got to come out and he's got to find a way to repeat his success, right? He's got to find a way to put the distractions behind him. Yes, he's the highest paid quarterback in the league. Yes, the expectations are through the roof. Yes, they ended the season last year on fire. But he has to come out and just be able to resort back to what got him in this position last year. And that's, like I said, I think it's going to be very telling about what kind of athlete Jordan Love is.
Absolutely agree. All right, last one, Detroit Lions. Super Bowl favorite, potentially, or up there. Maybe not the favorite, but in the top three. And most sports books. Are the Detroit Lions America's team going into the 2024 season? Are they the team everyone's rooting for? And is there a team you would like to see win a Super Bowl more than Detroit? Because to me, you know, the only other one I can think of, I'd love to see Buffalo win a Super Bowl because I feel like their fans deserve it and they've had some tough beats. I would love to see the Detroit Lions win a Super Bowl this year.
Oh, me too. I mean, look, outside of the New England Patriots, I think there's nobody I'd rather see like hoist that Lombardi trophy than Detroit. That's you know, my true feelings. And I think Detroit deserves it. I think they're just such a likable team, starting with Dan Campbell.
The coach.
He's super likable, right? That ownership is super likable. They've done things the right way. You got a guy like Jared Goff who was kicked out of LA for not being good enough, right? Finding becoming a reclamation project in Detroit. You know, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown who have that underdog chip in their shoulder, right? He can name every receiver that was drafted before him in his draft class. Like, those are the guys that in the team that it's just really easy to get behind, especially given their history, how bad they've been for so long.
Yeah.
I think they are America's new team, and I think that is because they're so likable.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit on the nail on the head. It starts with the coach.
Yeah.
He's likable, relatable guy.
Yeah.
People can get behind someone like that. They've got a lot of, I think, likable, scrappy, undervalued players that have come to a franchise that's kind of an undervalued franchise, come together and went on this run. You know, not enough is said, Justin, about the loss that team took in San Francisco last year and how that was one of the epic chokes in the history of the NFL. I think a little bit of that has to do with the fact that people just expect Detroit to fall back into that loser role that they've always been in. But realistically, the Detroit Lions should have been in the Super Bowl last year against a team they had already beaten in the regular season.
100%. And I think, look, I can name a couple of teams in a couple of different sports, but I feel like historically, right, with franchises, when you get so close to that ultimate goal of a championship, right, and you wind up falling short in a heartbreaking fashion, right, like blowing a big lead, losing a game you should have won, something that really leaves a bad taste in your mouth, right? I feel like more often than not, there's one of two outcomes the next season. Either you're the type of team who can do like what the 2014 Spurs did after that devastating. Remember the Ray Allen corner in the three that won the series for Miami, and then the Spurs came back next year, and that was the best team I've ever personally seen in basketball. Right. They ripped through the NBA and the Heat in the finals like a knife through warm butter. Right? You're either going to get the type of team who comes back this year with a vengeance, like a bat out of hell, and is able to take that next step and use that loss last year as motivation, or you're a team that lets a loss like that break you and you take a step back. And my gut tells me that this Lions team is going to use that for fuel and motivation.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do, because I would hate to have them. I mean, there's the whole Super Bowl loser thing. Obviously, they didn't make the Super Bowl, but I would hate them to be, getting caught up into that sort of loser thing and kind of have a letdown like you see some teams have after they have that kind of loss in the playoffs. I mean, it might have been that last year was their year. They were really right at the doorstep, and it just, I still don't know how you look back at that game, you're like, how did you lose that game? It's
unbelievable. They were up what? It was 21-3, I think, right? But you know what? I look at that team and I'm like, that team is all either young or entering their prime, right? Like there's nobody who it's like, oh, they're another year older, the Lions still going to be able to perform. You know what I mean? It's all young guys. So I hope another year in that type of experience is just going to help make this team more mature.
I mean, you talk about a team that's drafted well too.
Oh,
like they have nailed the draft the last 3 or 4 seasons. Like, even last year, they pulled Jahmyr Gibbs, they pulled the tight end. I mean, a couple other, I think, defensive players.
Aiden Hutchinson,
yep. The other
Yeah,
linebacker there that had all the interceptions. I mean, they are killing the draft.
Yeah. I mean, they have literally built that team almost entirely through the draft. I mean, they haven't even done a ton with free agency or the trade.
Right.
So that
exception of Goff, the quarterback.
Literally, with the exception of Goff. And Goff came in there as like a throwaway project.
Right. Well, throwaway in the Stafford deal.
Exactly.
And honestly, again, we've talked about this a little before, but I love rooting for Goff because he challenges the status quo of how everyone thinks of him. You put his accomplishments up against pretty much any other quarterback in the league besides Patrick Mahomes, and tell me where Jared Goff comes up short. He's been to a Super Bowl and lost. He's been to a conference championship game. He's had how many 4,000 or 30 touchdown seasons? Quite a few. The guy has been a good quarterback in his career. You could put his accomplishments up against Joe Burrow, and I'm telling you, they would not statistically, they're not. It's not that out of whack as you think it is.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
Josh Allen's never been to a Super Bowl.
Right.
Lamar Jackson's never been to a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson's never been to a conference championship game. Jared Goff's been to both.
I mean, look, Jared Goff is easily the second most accomplished quarterback in the NFC conference.
No doubt.
Behind Stafford. And other than Mahomes, he's one of the more accomplished quarterbacks in the NFL.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And we just don't think of him that way.
Right.
And that's what I find amazing. That's why I love pointing that out about Goff, because you bring up Jared Goff's name, people talk about him like he's trash. And the resume is just so much better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pick the order of the division. I got to go Detroit. I'm going to go Green Bay. I'm going to go Minnesota third, and I'm going to go Chicago last. And I know that's a little bit going against a lot of people out there, but I just feel like rookie quarterbacks, fine. I trust Minnesota's talent and coaching more than I trust Chicago's. So that's why I'm going to put them ahead. But I see those both as like 5 or 6 win teams at the bottom of the division. Green Bay, I think, will be a borderline 500 team that will struggle at times. And then I think Detroit will be one of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree pretty much with what you said. I could see a world where we flip-flop Minnesota and Chicago. Yeah. But I think I'm firmly in the camp that Detroit, like you said, is going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. And Green Bay will turn it on kind of at the end of the year like they did last year, find a way to come second in that division, get a wild card spot. And then Chicago and Minnesota are kind of a toss-up. I think you can flip a coin.
Minnesota has better talent on offense, and they have a veteran quarterback in Darnold. And I know that Darnold's nothing special, but we're talking about, third place here. And I feel like, can Darnold get that team with that talent to third place? I think so.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Chicago's backup, I forget his name. He was not bad last year when he got in there. The kid that came in for
Badgett.
Yeah. He won a few games. They were better with him, but I still think Darnold's probably a safer play.
For sure. I agree.
So that's why I picked Minnesota over Chicago.
Yeah, I question Minnesota's defense a little bit. I think they lost a couple pieces, but
they also drafted the rookie there in the first round there, the edge rusher there.
That's right. The guy who fell.
The guy who fell.
Yeah.
So they lost that. They lost the sack specialist there to Houston.
Yes.
His name escapes me. I can't remember think of his name.
Danielle Hunter.
Danielle Hunter.
Yes.
Yep. They lost him to Houston.
Yep.
Big signing for Houston, but they replaced him in the draft.
Right. So yeah. I think Minnesota, Chicago. I do agree Minnesota's a little bit more slightly talented, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went 3-4.
Yeah. Either way, but I don't think Chicago is anywhere near a playoff spot, and I don't think that Minnesota is either. I think they're both rebuilding.
No, and as a matter of fact, I kind of want to look at the Chicago schedule. I've heard they have one of the easier schedules in the NFL, but I'd be tempted to take their under in wins because I think they're getting a little bit of an artificial boost.
I looked at their schedule, and without bringing it up, I didn't think it was as easy as people said it was. It starts off really slow. They have some brutal stretches later in the season too.
Yeah.
So it's just that the hype is not fair. The hype is not going to match the outcome.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That's all the time we have. We want to thank everyone that listened. You got any more thoughts before we wrap it up, brother?
No, I'm just I know it's only the preseason, but I'm excited to have some football on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of got we got teased a little bit with that Hall of Fame game, right? Wound up getting rained out. Didn't really get much out of it. But yeah, I want to see some of these rookies. I want to see how some of these depth charts start to shake out. And I just want to see football.
Well, the consolation prize of the fact that this team is probably going to be out of it by like Thanksgiving, if not Halloween, is the fact that these preseason games become more relevant. That's like a small silver lining to that cloud. I mean, the preseason will be, I think, watchable for the Patriots this year, whereas it really hasn't been in a couple of years.
Yeah, and the preseason actually has purpose now.
It does. I mean, they have a lot that they need to develop, and there's a lot of like position battles. I mean, next week we're gonna I think take a little more of a focus on some of these position battles as we get closer to that first cut.
Yeah.
And we'll have had joint practices with the Eagles.
Yeah.
And the first game behind us. And we can get into some of these position battles, but they got some legit position battles on this team. There's no question about it.
They do. And it starts what, Friday?
Thursday. Thursday's the game.
Thursday. Okay. Yeah.
All right, man. All right. Well, listen, want to wrap it up. Want to say thank you to everyone that listened to this episode of the Dr. Football Podcast. Find our page on the Ultimate Patriots Podcast. Find it on Facebook. Find us on iTunes. Find us on Spotify, Instagram. We're everywhere. Want to thank everyone that listened. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next week. Enjoy the game Thursday night.